Hey, and welcome back to God's Hand Ministries, where we share testimonies of people and their stories in today's world. Today we have Jonathan with us sharing his testimony. So thank you very much for listening. And Jonathan, if you would introduce yourself and tell us about your story.
Yeah, sure. I'm Jonathan. Yeah, a little bit about me. I live here in Kansas City. Melissa and I go to the same church, and yeah, we were talking one day after church, and she was talking about this podcast or little broadcast you do, and I thought, oh, that's a cool thing, and I told her, hey, if you ever need somebody to share their story, um, I'd more than willing to hop on and tell. But yeah, so about me, I grew up in the church in a real small town in southern Missouri. It was a pretty normal upbringing, I guess. I was a star student. I was a little tiny kid. I grew pretty slow, but I was a star student. I was top of my class in school and in Sunday school. I memorized all the verses the quickest. I was the one who I was. I was a good kid. I didn't get into trouble. I thought I was doing everything right. I had my plan for my life. I was going to be an astronaut. That plan continued till I was about 23. So I mean, I'm not joking. It was that was my plan. Everything was going to plan too. Um, except when I went to college, I I didn't have a firm. I didn't have any faith whatsoever. And looking back, I tell people now, I'm like, I wasn't a Christian. I may have knew God existed. I may have acknowledged it. I did not have a personal relationship with him, and he was not in my heart. Um, when I went to college, I fell away really quickly, and I went to a school, an engineering school, and where the there was a lot more education in the science world and education of the world than there was of the biblical world, and very quickly I discovered alcohol, and I mean it was I think from about the age of 18 to 25, there was not a month I was sober. There was not a week I was sober. It was bad, and I became an alcoholic very quickly. And that impacted my studies. I studied aerospace engineering for about 3 years, and just nothing was working at all. And that made me drink more. And then I discovered drugs, and that made it worse. I was filling a void, and yeah, I went through a major identity crisis, and my whole identity was wrapped up in this idea of me being a rocket scientist. As silly as that sounds, but that's what my whole identity was. Like growing up, that's all anybody ever told me. They're like, "Oh, you're going to be a rocket scientist someday. You're so smart. You're going to go invent something. You're going to be this and that." And I took that and I was like, "Well, that must be what I'm supposed to do, so I'm going to do it." And I tried to do it myself and wasn't in the plans. um yeah, so about the end of 2016, I had a major falling out. Some friends of mine actually had an intervention for me. It was bad. Um, I was brought into a room. The whole "Hey, we think you're drinking too much." One of my professors was there. Man, I really respect, and he said something that really stuck out to me in that, and I'll never forget it. As mad as I was about them for the intervention, I still it's hard for me to get over it because I was very upset with them. Um, but my professor said something to me that I will never forget because he was also once an alcoholic, and he said to me, he said, "You don't." He's like, I know where you are." He said, "You aren't drinking because it's fun. You aren't drinking to have a good time." He says, "You're drinking because you hate yourself." And I was, and so I that's the only thing I remember really. Um, but yeah, so yeah, nothing was working out, and somehow it all still didn't come together that day. I just dove harder into my substance abuse, and that brings us to summer 2017, which was a pretty pivotal year. And it is weird that I can, I find it funny that every year I can just pinpoint like huge turning points. And looking back now after I'm saved, it's like it all makes sense and it's all led up to God saving me. But
Mm.
Yeah, so 2017, I changed my majors to I changed my major to IST, which we joked around and said I stopped trying. But it's just information science and technology. So it's kind of like a hybrid between IT and business. And but yeah, so that was 2017, and I was like, okay, I can do this. My classes were a little easier. It's like I think I could get a job with this. There's a lot more job opportunities. I'm like, okay, logically in my head, this made sense, you know. Yeah, then 2017 summer rolls around. It was probably one of the most fun summers of my life. I was absolutely living on poverty. I was just bartending part time. Didn't wasn't taking classes, just bartending and going to the gym, and that was about it. That was the entire summer, and I had nothing going on, and it was honestly pretty fun. But yeah, but it was pretty fun. But and that was the summer I met this gal. Her and I started dating, and man, I fell in love with her. It was her and I were talking. We were gonna get married, and she was amazing. And I mean, so that was probably beginning of that summer. And at the end of that summer, um, it was at the end of that summer, I had the worst day of my life. And it's pretty rare you can say this was the worst day. No, this was the worst day. um, I was on during that day. Well, it was kind of like a night into a day, but the night before, I was out at the bar with my friends, and we went. We were back at my house, and then we're all sitting in my friend's living room, and you know, partaking in whatever. And next thing I know, we hear this screaming in the backyard, and my friend Trevor had fallen off our porch, and he broke his ankle. His ankle was the wrong way, and so nobody was sober to actually take him to the hospital.
Oh
And
no.
so we were just trying to figure out. So he's sitting here like crying, and he's in a lot of pain, and we're all just like, how are we getting him to the hospital? None of us can drive. And one of my roommates just got home after working his shift at the bar. So this guy was sitting in the backyard, like crying and waiting for like 45 minutes. And he's hurt, and none of us could, we weren't sober enough to do anything about it. And one of my roommates got back that about then, and he was sober. He'd been working at the bar, and so he was able to get us in the car. So I picked up Trevor, got him into his car, and we took him to the hospital. And I sat there with him all night. And yeah, so sat there with him all night, and then the next morning I was supposed to go to a wedding with a friend of mine was getting married. So this gal, my girlfriend and I at the time, she was my date, and we were going to go to this wedding. So I was got home about 6 a.m. from the ER, and then about 7 a.m. I had to leave to go to St. Louis. So it's about 7 a.m. and I'm ready. I've got my suit on and everything, and I head to St. Louis, and I'm going to stop by my girlfriend's house to pick her up. And I get there, and she's not ready or anything, and I'm like, "What? Where's your stuff? Did you pack a bag?" And she didn't, and she dumped me. And
Mm.
it was I'll never this is another one of those things where I will never forget her reasoning. And looking back, she's 100% right. And she said that she thought I was more in love with the relationship than I was with her.
Mm.
And look at the time, I was like, that's stupid. That's why. What the heck? But now it makes sense. I was again trying to fill that void in my life. I was lost, and I was trying to find something to fill this gaping hole in my heart. Um, and somehow I still didn't see it, and it was staring me in the face the whole time. Um, so yeah, so I she dumps me, and I'm on my way to this wedding, and I get to the wedding, and you know, hotel room to myself now. So I get to this wedding, and I'm, you know, all my friends are like, "Oh, we were so excited to meet your girlfriend. Where is she?" And I was like, didn't have the heart to say, didn't have the heart to say that I, just got broken up with. And so, I did what I only thing I knew how, which was just drink myself into oblivion that night. And I just drank until I passed out and fell asleep in my hotel room, and then woke up, and then it's time to go home. And on my way home, my mother called, and my grandfather had passed away, or my great grandfather had passed away. And then, yeah, and so it was a lot to take in all at once. And then and so and then a couple days went by, and I spent more time at the bar than I did at home, and honestly, yeah. Um, and then another few days went by, and then my mother's father or stepfather passed away. He was kind of the only grandfather I actually had. Didn't wasn't very close, but he passed away too. And then later that week, a family friend passed away. It was it was rough. It was a rough time, and it was a lot all at once. And I was searching for answers everywhere. um, but yeah, so and it was weird, and it was it was, and that was about the time I started playing rugby too, and that was probably one of the better things I've done. Nothing like getting your emotions out than hitting guys on a field. But um, yeah, so about the end of that brings me to about let's see about the end of 2017. I was lost and I was hurting. I was really hurt. Um, there was a Facebook ad that I saw, and it was this picture of this guy, and he was standing up on a mountain and was looking out over this valley, and it just said, "This was my office for a year." And I was like, "Well, that sounds cool. What kind of job is that?" So I looked into it and I clicked on it, which that was the worst thing I could have done because now all these ads start popping up.
Right.
But yeah, so I was like, "That sounds great. I like being outside," and so I answered this ad, and it's for the Montana Conservation Corps. I applied. And then, yeah, a couple of months went by. They gave me a job interview. I wasn't qualified for it in the slightest. I'd never done any sort of manual labor outside. Um, so little did I know this is something that would completely change my life. And, this is how God would reveal himself to me. And it was, um, so yeah, now we're in like spring of 2018. I just got the job offer, and I was like, this is awesome. I'm going to go live in the mountains. Like, I'm going to go be off grid for a long time. And it was weird because it was so weird. There was a really weird emotion, a lot of weird emotions I was experiencing where it's like everything I had felt before this. I was nervous, I was scared, I was, this or that. I was like confused. But this, for some reason, there was like a weird sense of purpose, and like I wasn't scared. I was like, I got to do this. And there was a weird like, all right, I'm on a journey. Let's do this. And it was like there was this weird courage that was bubbling up. And anyways, so I get to Montana, and I feel at home. Out there in the woods, I was home, and I'm not joking. I could go on for hours about waking up every single morning and just the beauty I saw every single morning,
Wow.
and the things I've seen. I've seen things that very few people have seen. Like I remember one night, it was a particularly rough day on trail. Um, we'd been carrying our crosscut saws, like we carried them like 10 miles that day, and it was a long day. I was worn out. And after, for some reason, I just decided, on a whim, that I would start taking some quiet time every night. And I'd take 15 minutes after dinner, after the whole crew had gone to bed, and I would just sit and just watch the sunset. And it was I this one night, I think this was in the Pentler Rangers district up, I think, in Phillipsburg, Montana, in Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. Um, I'm just sitting there on this stump looking out over this field. I have pictures of it still. I'm looking out over this field, and a herd of like mule deer come out, and it was amazing. And they had just, like, all the baby fawns had just been born, and they were just learning how to walk. And I'm sitting here by myself, and then these mule deer walk up to me, and it's the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And it was weird too, 'cause, like, normally deer are pretty afraid of us, but they weren't afraid. And it was, I don't know, there's this weird thing going on. And anyways, that was amazing. And then I went to bed, and I just kind of had this weird, like, that was different. Something was going on. And I woke up that morning, and there was a big, woke up a little bit before the crew. I think it was like 4:30 in the morning. Woke up, and the sun was just starting to come over, and there was a huge rainbow right over that field. It had rained the night before, and it just, this just sense of peace just washed over me, and it just, this weird feeling of like, you're loved. It's okay.
Amen.
And I just, yeah, and it was, I'm starting to get a little teary eyed thinking about it, because it's just that moment. it's like I had been hurting for so long, and something just, it's like it finally broke, and it was like, you're loved, it's okay. And the funny part is, even after all that, it still took me almost 2 years to realize that this was God talking to me. Yeah, and I had a couple more I had some near death experiences up there that really, really kind of scared me and made me realize some stuff. There was one time we were out digging on the side of this mountain. We were digging some trail, and I slipped and fell, and I fell backwards. Like, it was like 10 feet, but there was a tree that was laying like this. And when a pine tree is laid down and there's all its branches sticking up, I landed and was wedged right in between the two branches that were broken off. I mean, if it was 1 inch to either way, I would have punctured my lungs, and I would have been dead. And I mean, there would have been no saving me. There was nowhere for a
Mm.
helicopter to land. We didn't have radio service, no cell service for 60 miles at least.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and then I'll never forget the ranger that was with us. He just kind of looked at me and went, "Somebody's looking out for you." It's what he wasn't mean anything by it, but it was like just some that stuck with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then later on in the season, I had a moment one night where this was the most terrifying one. I woke up one night and there was a grizzly outside my tent. It was sniffing my tent, and I just thought to myself, I just said, "This is it." And it's like, I can't do anything right now. I'm complete powerless. There's nothing I can do except pray that this. And it was like, somehow in the moment where everything, I had no control or whatever, I just reached. It was like spiritually just reaching out, just saying, "Please, if you're there, please." And then it was like, somehow all of a sudden I was just able to go back to bed, and just like this, I was like, it was just like this. It'll be okay. Just go back to bed. And that morning it was okay. And then I looked, saw the tracks around my tent in the morning. I took a picture of them with my hand next to it. It's kind of crazy. So my hand, the bear track is like twice the size of my hand, and like,
Oh, Lord.
yeah. Um, and the story gets worse actually. Pretty sure that was the same grizzly. So on our way out of that hitch, we passed these couple guys coming in. They're on horses, and we're like, they're coming in to do some hunting, and we're like, "Hey, how's it going? Haven't seen anybody in a long time." So we stopped and talked, and then we got back to town to resupply. And I saw a news article that my cousin had sent me, and he's like, "Hey, did you hear about this? A guy got attacked by a bear." And he's like, "Did you hear? It was like right where you were working." I was like, "Yeah, is that in Teton Wilderness?" And he's like, "Yeah." So he sent me the article, and it was the guy that I had just said hi to was killed by a bear,
Oh, my word.
um, on that trail. And it just, man, it really put a lot into perspective. And yeah, so then so I'm sitting here on this, just so after about 6 months of this, at the end of 2018, I'm on my way home, and I'm like, I've had this incredible experience, and I've had all of this knowledge and wisdom, I mean, it's just everything like imparted on me, and I didn't know what to do with it. I get home and it's like, now what? What do you do now? We You just had this amazing experience. Nobody can relate to you because nobody nobody you know has done this. Um, and this is something that a lot of people I've talked to. This is very similar to a feeling that a lot of like through hikers get, or um, people that hike like the Appalachian Trail or the Continental Divide Trail or Pacific Crest Trail. They get the same feeling when you get back. It's just like you can't relate to anyone. There's nobody in your circle that you can relate to. Nobody's seen the things you've seen. Nobody's done the things you've done, and it's just you can't. You're you feel alone, very alone. And that void just kept growing. Um, but now it was even worse because I knew that God was out there, and I knew that He loved me, and I kept turning, and I kept up with the substance abuse. It's the only thing I knew, and I was about as far from God as I could be. Um, that brings me to about summer 19. Summer 19 really shook me up. Summer and fall 19. Um, from about the end of Conservation Corps in 2018 to this, I was a wreck. I'll be honest, I was a wreck. I was coasting through school. I mean, my grades weren't bad. I'm a fairly intelligent person. I could, you know, I didn't have to study or anything, but I just, I was gone. And in in 2019, I lost my uncle, and died very young. I think he was 50, and he and I were very close. Um, and I just and it I'm still trying to make sense of it. Um, I don't. All I can hope is that he's in a better place. I don't know. A lot of my family's very lost, and yeah, I don't. I pray for him all the time, and I miss him. But yeah, so that happened, and then and then it was like, man, not joking. It's everything piles up all at once whenever it happens. So I lost him, and then in one of my rugby games, um, I got hit in the head really hard, and I had a pretty major concussion. Um, I lost consciousness for a while, and then when I came to, um, I was weird. It was different. Something was different, and for about a few weeks after that, I couldn't control my emotions. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't. I couldn't. I would forget my name. I would, I'd forget how to do the ABCs. Like when I was on the radio, and I'd have to sort out my songs. I forgot. I would forget stuff like that. Um, and at the same time, I was dating this one gal, and I didn't love her. As horrible as that is, I was not a good person, and so I broke up with her at the same time as all this is going on. And then on top of this, I was in a leadership role in our radio station, and I had to weigh in on some issues. Uh, I had to weigh in on some stuff that really affected people's lives, as far as their careers, and I had to make some decisions that I can't get into on here because it is very private stuff. But I had to make some decisions that were not very popular and made a lot of people very upset. But it was what I thought was right, and I'll never apologize about doing what I thought was right. But it was just I lost so many friends after that, and so not only just all this going on, and then losing all my friends, and this was about the time I thought about ending it. And I was like, you know what? We've tried for years. There's one thing we haven't tried. We could just end it. And I thought about that for a long time, and it was tough. Um, and I just remember sitting there in my bed one night. I'm just sitting there, and I'm having trouble thinking straight, and I'm just trying to figure out, am I going to get up tomorrow? Do I want to get up tomorrow? And and then my thoughts kind of started turning, and it was like where I started to want to lash out at people. And that's when I was like, no. And I actually went and got therapy, which was probably one of the better decisions I've ever made. It helped me understand a lot about myself. Um, it was a temporary fix, though. The void was still there. It just kind of helped me say, hey, there is a void. Um, so yeah, then, you know, COVID hit. I was alone, unemployed, was living by myself at this time. I'd had a few scares, with homelessness and, um, some financial issues. Our school like lost all of my financial information, so I got like no money, and I'm had like college to pay for, and was poor, and was honestly didn't know if I was going to be able to live in the house I was living in for like the next week. I was getting they're threatening eviction on me, so I couldn't pay my bills, and it was scary. It was really scary. Um, yeah. So then, fast forward a few months, I was at least a little bit more secure. COVID hit. Uh, you know, March 2020. I was alone, unemployed, and I was drinking more than ever. My classes were online, so now I was isolated, and yeah. But then I got a job offer here up in Kansas City, um, right around graduation in 2020. Moved here to KC, and kind of just had this weird thing of like, okay, something has to change. Maybe it's fitness. Maybe we'll get healthy, and maybe that'll fix it. So I lost it. Got to KC, lost like 50 pounds, just running and like crazy. Got my job, and I started like, so I'm in my job. I'm financially provided for. I'm healthy, and I'm sitting here going, is this it? Is this my life now? I've worked so hard. I've gone through so much pain and all this. Is this it? Is this what my life is about? Just going to work, coming home, making dinner, going to bed, going to work, coming home, making dinner, going to bed. Is that my life? And it just ate away at me, and it kept eating away at me. And then finally, um, January 2021, this year, I was with a friend of mine, this really amazing woman. Her and I had been talking and back and forth, and she just said, "You need to stop drinking." She's like, "Stop entirely." And something in me it was like, it was like she wasn't even the one saying it. And then I was just like, I gotta stop. So I quit. And I mean, as of today, I've lost track of, I think I'm almost 100 days sober. So I'm pretty happy about that. Yeah. And then like a week after that, I was in a church service because she'd been making me go to church. She's like, you need to get to church. She's like, you need Jesus. That's what it all is. And I was just in this sermon. I had this Bible that I've had for like 10 years, and I've never opened it. And I didn't know who got it for me. I couldn't remember, but it was and that comes up here in a second. Yeah, I got so I that during that sermon, I was looking in the back of this Bible, big old John MacArthur study Bible, and it had this list of verses, and it was like evidences of a genuine saving faith. And everything I'd been basing everything off of was based on a few of these verses, which I forgot to write down. I can put them. We can put them in the show notes. We'll edit and post, but um, and everything I had hinged my life on was like was not evidence of salvation, was not evidence that I is saved. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it's like it just hit me, it wrecked me. It brought me to my knees, and I just said, I'm not saved, I need help. And I just broke down right there in this tiny church, ugly crying loudly on a televised church service. And I'm like just sobbing, and the pastor's like walking around, and I just I reach out and I grab him, and I'm like, I need help. And I just like yelled it in his face. And at that moment I gave it all up, and I said, God, I need you. I need you in my life. You're what I need. And since then it's been a roller coaster, but above it all, I have finally have peace. I don't feel that void anymore. It's crazy, and it's above all of it else, I just feel like this weird sense of it'll be okay. We got this. It's just okay. And everything has changed since then. I mean, people talk about a weight being lifted. It was entirely a weight lifted off of me. I just all of my burden's gone, and I could physically feel it. I'm not even I could physically It was so crazy. I could physically feel just a relief. And yeah, that brings us to here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's, it's so good. What what kind of if you were to see someone that was in your shoes before, or in your shoes now, like, what would you tell them? What kind of encouraging words would you have for them?
It's hard. It's hard because I have to put myself, I have to think back what would have shook me out of it. And I mean, you heard all of what God had to do to shake me out of it. I think just knowing you're loved, you can be vulnerable. Um, this is a big part of this for me. Is one of the things I'm learning is a big part of healing for me is allowing myself to be vulnerable. Yes, people will fail me. People will fail all of us. You can't put your faith in people. But being vulnerable to God and putting your faith in Him will never let you down. And that was because I'd been in survival mode for years. I was in a constant fight or flight, you know. And then I finally just said, "Look, I'm tired of running." But yeah, I think, long story short, I think that's what I would say. It's just you're loved. It's okay.
That's good though. That'll encourage somebody, and that's what matters.
I hope so. Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's like any addiction you're facing. It's not, you know, it's not bigger than God is.
Right.
I mean, I still struggle. I still occasionally really want to drink, but you know what? In those moments, instead of drinking, what I'll do is I'll message my friends here at the church. I'll just reach out, and that's all it takes. It's just reaching out, and somebody's there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to lean on each other, and that's so good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing and for opening up and being vulnerable with your story. And I'm excited to see who's going to be encouraged and who's going to this is really going to speak to them.
Yeah, yeah, if this speaks to one person, it's all worth it.
Absolutely. Amen.
But yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks. And for those listening, make sure to subscribe so you can get notified of all new testimony videos that will be coming in the future. Thank you very much, and we'll see you later.